mental health, it is so important, and never more so than right now. Okay, so this is a time when um, a lot of people are going through a lot of changes when it comes to their routines, and a lot of people will be feeling that. Okay, so some more positively than others. And with that being said, everything in life comes down to environment, comes down to lifestyle, comes down to gut health, and what you put in your body, what you get in, what you put in, you get out, basically. Okay, so I'm very excited to be partnered with this gentleman that I'm going to introduce now. Dr. Rakowski is one of the top functional nutritionists in the world. So for those of you who are a bit older, you may remember Evander Holyfield, the heavyweight champion of the world, boxer. Well, he extended his career. Whoa, that was a picture of my arm there. He extended his career by 10 years using natural medicine. As you can probably recognize a lot of these guys, that's Hua Ming. I think if I'm pronouncing his name, probably the tall guy from the NBA. And lots of other athletes. And one of the things that Dr. Rakowski is known for is getting fast results effectively with clean methods, all natural. And so since then, Dr. Rakowski has been working with a lot of people who've been essentially written off by the medical industry, essentially. People and getting some really interesting and quality results with people that otherwise would have had, in this case, their leg amputated and all the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Rakowski for the course of the next 25 minutes. Okay, so we're probably going to do 15 minutes of slides and stuff and some information just for you guys to take away, and then we're going to have a quick Q&A at the end as well. Okay, so over to you, Dr. Rakowski, and thanks so much for taking the time out from your busy day.
Well, Sir Lloyd, you know what, I always appreciate you. Great intro. And this foot, by the way, is a really good bridge to the brain. About 7 years ago, I lectured at a conference with Dr. Dale Bredesen, who wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's. And at that point, they'd already had hundreds of cases of Alzheimer's that they had reversed. And now they're in the thousands. But you know, I taught an international series on neurology in 2009 with a neurologist from Cornell. And the conversation went around the fact that whenever you have a brain problem, there are three distinct zones of cells. There are cells that are dead. Well, there's nothing we can do about those. So for instance, these are dead cells on the foot that have become gangrenous. There are cells that are fine. You know, we don't need to do anything about cells that are fine, but in between are a whole host of cells that are functional but not functioning. And if we can bring back function, we can get back function. So this is actually the same foot. This foot was scheduled to be amputated 2 days later. This was the foot 2 weeks later. And that was the foot 17 months later. And I tell people that bodies respond to frequency, duration, intensity, quality, and timing of stimuli. And we've created changes like that for brains and other organ systems in the body. So when we start looking at the brain, our brain is super powerful. 100 trillion connections. That's more leaves than exist in the Amazon forest. This is Daniel Amen, and he had a TED Talk entitled What I Learned from 83,000 Brain Scans. And quite simply, what Dr. Amen learned is that you can change people's brains. And the way you do that is by giving them what they need in order to change. And so, you know, the concept is neuroplasticity. The brain can remodel. Dr. Amen wrote a book called The End of Mental Illness, and he asked the question, what if brain health and mental health were the same? Well, we know that they are strongly correlated. So these are actual brain scans. An Alzheimer's brain, you can see, looks very different than a healthy brain. And someone with overweight and obese apnea, guess what? They're right up there with the Alzheimer's brain. Shouldn't be a big surprise that obesity creates an inflammatory process that is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's. It sets up insulin resistance, prediabetes, even diabetes, another major risk factor for Alzheimer's. And what we put in our brain in terms of thought makes a difference. So this is a scan of the same brain in a hateful state as well as a grateful state. And I've done some seminars on post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's a very serious issue for people that have it. But here's a fact. We had a Boston Marathon bombing a few years ago. One of my associate doctors was actually at that event. She said, you know, we knew a bomb went off. We knew something was going on. We just got out of there. you know? And later on, we figured out what had actually happened. Well, they found out that people that watched 6 or more hours of coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing on TV had more post-traumatic stress disorder. So the TV and the bad news especially is not good for what's in between most people's ears. When we start looking at nature versus nurture, I'm going to make a bridge to cancer for a moment, and then I'm going to tie it back to the brain and even addiction. But the pros will tell us that cancer is 90 to 95% environment, at most 10% genetic. And so a lot of quotes about that. Life is 10% what happens, 90% how you react to it. And when we look at addiction, it's a growing brain problem. And this is a researcher that took a little different path on studying addiction. There's a classic experiment where they would put rats in a cage with basically some morphine water and some regular water, available to them. And when the rats were all alone, basically they would drink the morphine water until they got addicted and ultimately died. But this researcher decided to create a rat utopia where the rats had plenty of playmates, plenty of toys, plenty of fresh air, really good food, and not a single rat overdosed on morphine water in that environment. And then we have a human study that correlates. After the US-Vietnam War, 20% of the US soldiers actually came home heroin addicts. But after they got home and met with their family and things that they really enjoyed, 95% of these people completely recovered without a treatment program. So I'll mention briefly a product called NeuroTracker, which is also available through the company that we're partnered with, where they actually know that NeuroTracker can help to rewire the addicted brain in a way that makes it less addictive. It also monitors recovery of professional athletes. The brain is the most hydrated organ in our body. It's actually 77% water, and dehydration can actually resemble dementia. Interestingly enough, they've used neurotrackers on athletes, and they know that when their hydration status drops, they can actually tell it by their brain performance. So pretty fascinating. Mirroring Dr. Amen's TED Talk, what have I learned from 10,000 hydration tests? Well, most people are dehydrated. And people will say, well, I drink my 10 glasses of water a day or whatever they drink. Well, it's not as straightforward as that. Water follows particles. So as I tell my patients and my students, particles will draw water into the cell, whereas toxins will draw water from the cell. So if we can improve the nutrient status of the body while simultaneously decreasing the toxins, we get a double benefit for hydration status. The second most common content of the brain is actually fat, and it's a special fat called DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, which is found in cold water fish. And when we look at DHA in the blood around the world, we can see that especially the Western world has a lot of brain problems because they're not making an optimal brain. This was a study from the Lancet where they looked at fish consumption versus major depression. Cultures that consumed the most fish had the least depression. Pregnancy is very near and dear to my heart. I have 3 wonderful children, and now I have 2 new grandchildren. And, we made sure that moms got a lot of good omega-3 fats throughout their entire pregnancy, because this study showed that if a mom's diet is omega-3 deficient, the baby will actually cannibalize the mom's brain to grow its own brain. Baby is the highest priority. The next generation wins. So a mom on an omega-3 deficient diet can shrink her brain as much as 21% in a single reproductive cycle. For completion, I tell people the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, and toxin vulnerable system in our bodies. And your brain on stress, your brain has to prioritize blood flow. So the higher level thought centers in the frontal cortex, they're deprived of blood. The joy centers in the midpoint of the brain, they are deprived of blood. And we basically run on our reptilian brain, which is reflex activity. A chronic blood marker of chronic stress is cortisol, And there are over 8,500 medical studies on cortisol and depression. When we start looking at our toxic world, there are over 80,000 registered toxic chemicals in our environment. Autism is up to an all-time high. In 1970, the incidence was 1 in 10,000. New data shows it's about 1 in 37. And one of the top risk factors is toxin exposure. And we know from umbilical cord blood studies that newborn infants are exposed to more than 200 toxins before they ever take their first breath. While we start talking about children, again, NeuroTracker is something I want to plug again and again because it's proven to create a better brain in just 90 minutes. But basically, it works in kids that have attention deficit. It also works in people that have brain trauma, brain dehydration, and even senior citizens. The Global Nutrition Report quite simply says that the entire world is suffering from malnutrition. Gratefully, there are fewer and fewer starving children, but there's an increasingly starved population. So farmers found out about 5 decades ago that they could grow big plants with 3 elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But it takes 30 elements to make healthy plants, animals, and humans. So that's one thing that I've taught about for years. If you deplete the soil doesn't have it to give it to the plants can't give it to the animals, and then the plants and animals can't give it to the humans. Barry Sears is a famous PhD, wrote a book called The Zone, and I gave a co-lecture with him in 2002 in Orlando, Florida, and he put up what it was at the time the USDA food pyramid. And he had a very powerful statement. He said, if ever there was a terrorist-like plot designed to destroy the health of the world, this would be it, with 9 to 11 servings of processed carbohydrates at the base. So I created a life pyramid after that, with love, purpose, and discipline working on the bottom rungs all the way up. But I also created a nutrition pyramid. So at the bottom is nature's foods. And I like Jack LaLanne's quote, if God made it, it's okay. If man made it, don't touch it. After nature's foods are superfoods. Superfoods are special foods. They have all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water, and at a dose that make a difference to human health. I've used functional foods in clinical practice. These are shakes that are proven to have a health benefit. And now they actually have functional beverages, coffee and tea that are infused with superfoods that have become almost an overnight billion-dollar industry because people drink coffee or tea every day, and most people notice a difference after just a cup or 2. So when we start looking at the top superfood on the planet, it's called Ganoderma lucidum. I've given full-day lectures on Ganoderma and brain health, but here are a list of medical studies where it shows that Ganoderma is really good for the brain chemicals serotonin for happiness, GABA for calm, acetylcholine for memory, and dopamine, which has 3 major functions: concentration in the frontal cortex, joy in the locus coeruleus of the brain, and dopamine for fine motor control in the substantia nigra. There are medical studies that show that Ganoderma can enhance stem cells and neuroregeneration. It's actually proven to be anti-Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and even anti-seizure. So Ganoderma is called the herb of spiritual immortality. It's known to calm the body through a parasympathetic nervous system mechanism, the mind through facilitating calming brain chemistry, and yes, even the spirit. And that might be hard to imagine, but if you look up this PubMed, just type this in your Google search bar, you'll find within the first paragraph of that article that Ganoderma has long been known as the herb of spiritual immortality. So I happen to like this quote: any program that's created is only as good as the compliance. And this was from Dr. Seuss's book, Green Eggs and Ham. And this guy said, look, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am, right? He says it, 100 times throughout the book. Well, in the end, he discovers he does like it. But if you don't like something, you're not going to try it. If you're doing coffee every day or tea every day, why not make it a healthier choice? So a comment on our coffee and tea: coffee is known to have more than 30 different acids within it. So ours is processed in a way which neutralizes the acids while still maximizing the nutrient delivery within coffee. And then we infuse Ganoderma in it. And we have coffee and tea and hot chocolate and shakes and things like that. But by minimizing the acid in the coffee, every enzyme in nature or in man is pH dependent. So as we bring a neutral to alkaline coffee in, we make the enzymes work better. So why do we use coffee as a delivery system? 2.25 billion cups of coffee a day. Let's just say that that's a really big number. You know, I used to say that 1 billion years ago, there was no life on planet Earth. 1 billion days ago, no human life on planet Earth. 1 billion hours ago was the Stone Age. 1 billion minutes ago was the Roman Empire. 1 billion seconds ago was over 35 years ago. But 1 billion cups of coffee ago, you know, that was half a day ago. So when you start thinking about that, what if we could make coffee healthier? As a clinical practitioner, I can tell you for years, I tried to pull people off of coffee. I could get them to quit alcohol. I could get them to quit sugar. I could get them to quit gluten. I could get them to quit dairy. But if I asked them to quit coffee, forget it. We had a fight, right? Almost nobody ever did it. Well, now what if we made their coffee the healthiest part of their day? And that's what we've done. So when you look at the way the world is going, you know, do you know anybody interested in better health? How about better wealth? How about both? Well, that's actually what we offer. The law of compensation says that we will be compensated according to how many people we help and how much we help them. And, you know, when you start looking at this, we actually have ways of building teams. So my wife and I have done this part-time for a little over 8 years. And our team is approaching 19,000 people in 20 countries. And, you know, did we introduce that many people to our products? No, but we introduced people like Lloyd and David, who started sharing it, who found people who started sharing it, who started sharing it. And next thing you know, we're helping the whole world. One of my great mentors, Jim Rohn, would talk about the law of diminishing intent. And quite simply, he said, you know, the longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are to act on it. So basically, we're gonna ask you, you know, do you know anybody who could benefit from a healthier choice or possibly another income stream? And if that's you or you know somebody, we need to have a further conversation. Lloyd and David met through a mastermind. And basically, 2 or more people together synergizing is always more powerful than one. And we have a group of thought leaders all over the world wanting to make the world better. Our company has global distribution currently in 36 different countries and growing with proven systems, including Zooms and recordings and simple procedures. I happen to like this gif of this dancing mushroom, but literally we have a coffee or tea for everybody's taste, and different products we utilize different parts of the mushroom that have different benefits. Highest quality on the planet. You know, if I were to go back to that picture of Yao Ming that Lloyd pointed out, when I treated Yao, the entire Rockets management called me in for a meeting. And they said, look, you know, this is out of our box. This is out of our paradigm. After they had failed under every treatment, one of my patients said, look, go see Dr. Bob. I just about guarantee you he can help. Well, we did help Yao Ming, but when I sat down with management, they looked at me and they said, look, if our guy flunks a drug test, you'll never practice again. I just looked at him, I said, if your guy flunks a drug test, it's not on anything that I'm going to give, because everything that I give has the highest quality certification and a product liability insurance behind it to guarantee quality. But of all the products I use, Organo's coffee and tea has the highest certification. Our products are USDA certified organic along with other certifications. This is what the competition often has. They can claim it's organic. Why? Because there's no herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, but these plants are not even healthy enough to reproduce. So, Lloyd, I want to see if there are any questions before we wrap things up.